when it was game time. So it sounds like he's going to have another opportunity today. Definitely be on the lookout, because it sounds like him and Ryan Barker, who is another walk-on kicker, are kind of competing for that job. And they're both left-footed kickers. One's 93, one's 94, so they look a lot alike. So be on the lookout. See if they're swapping out kicks. I definitely think that is a possibility. They rotate, but Sander Sahedek's got to get his mental game back right, D. Frank.
Yeah. What is that conversation like with James Franklin? Because what he says to us, and I actually asked him a follow-up on, so what do you mean by you need to learn and take a significant step each week, is how he phrased it. So what is the conversation like behind closed doors versus what we hear, where it feels like it's probably more diplomatic and a little more massaged for the outward expression of an inward conversation in those weeks where you win, but maybe you don't perform the way that the coaching staff ultimately really wants.
Yeah, you're sitting in a meeting, he's saying, get it the F right, pretty much. I mean, it's a lot harsher than what the media gets. He's going to – it's a game. Coach Franklin gets paid a lot of money. This university makes a lot of money. And, a lot of guys, when you come in, it's just a game and it's like whatever. But you don't realize, these coaches' lives are on the line. And so next thing you know, it's like – you start messing up his ability to win, he's going to have to take you out. It doesn't matter that Sander Sahedek is the only scholarship kicker. That was kind of what happened with Alex Felkins last year when Sander missed 2 kicks against West Virginia. Yeah. Alex Felkins came in and really even wasn't on scholarship at the time and then got put on scholarship. So, right now, I don't know. I don't know where you go with that. It depends how Sander does today. And it's like, even if Sander does, let's just say, like, he goes for two for 2 today. Yeah. Are you confident at USC when we need to trot him out there if it's tied game, something like that? So, but are you also confident in your other walk-on young kicker? So I think, I'm just going to be honest, it's going to be a problem all year. Yeah. I don't see any way it's not, and I hate to say that. And that stops a team from being great. Your special teams, especially your kicking unit, can't be good. I don't really know what to say, I'm going to be honest. So hopefully Sander Sahedek can kind of catch wind and just get back into his rhythm. But as where we stand right now, it's hard to have confidence in the kicking unit. I'm just going to be honest.
This is the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. I want to apologize to our streaming audience over on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Had some technical issues to start. We had 2 or 3 things happening at the beginning of the show, so appreciate everyone sticking with us. We shouldn't have any more problems throughout the rest of the afternoon. The one last point about this particular conversation. So I asked James Franklin a follow-up, and he elaborated on 2 or 3 different things from last week, but one of the major points I feel like he made was we didn't put that team away as early as we should have. How much is winning a game in the first half a part of the conversation a lot of times? Because you talk about settling for those field goals, but you are settling for those field goals where you had 2 opportunities in the high red zone or just outside the red zone where the offense went 13 plays and in one situation in the fourth quarter got no points, and then you settle for a field goal when you had 2 opportunities to get a first down and you missed that opportunity. In the middle 8 minutes last week, Penn State in the second quarter had 2 opportunities within 5 minutes to score. They didn't score in either of those situations. How much is that stressed of putting a team away early?
Yeah, that's definitely something that Coach Franklin is talking about. I mean, when you play a team, let's say, and there was a lot of conversation about this. It was Illinois, number 19 versus number 9 Penn State, and people were saying, hey, because it was a 14-point win against a ranked team, that's a good win. I wouldn't classify. I mean, I think we learned a lot about the team, and that was good, especially the run game and the defense. But I wouldn't categorize how we played against Illinois as a good win. I don't think just how we put it all together, like I said, all the points we left out there. So, I mean, there's a point of emphasis to start fast, and there always is. Yeah. And I got to say, I said this on my show yesterday, it's like, it's really not even the offensive coordinator, it feels like. We have never started fast, like in the past. Yeah. Think back, even back to like 2016, when we were, started whatever, down like 2 touchdowns to Wisconsin, just always, the whole year, just started really slow and came on and said that we're a second half team, that type of thing. And so, I mean, it just kind of feels like that's how we've always done it at Penn State. And I will say the big thing of starting fast is when you're an offense, you come into a game with 10 to 15 scripted plays. Yeah. And what that means is you sit down, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, maybe the head coach, and you talk about, okay, what plays do we really like? What plays do we want to run to get our offense going? So clearly you saw Illinois had a good game plan, and then Tom Allen adjusted to their scrypted plays, and that was over. Yeah, but we clearly, we have not came out yet. where it seems like we have just perfectly game planned. Because
Yeah.
if you come out and you say, hey, let's run, pass, whatever it is, and we
They
know
they did score on that opening. Penn State did score on their opening drive, and then I guess that's the part where you look at that second quarter. There was one other drive because of the way that Illinois plays, and they were making Penn State earn it, going dink and dunk down the field. You only had 4 drives in that first half, so the adjustment drive at the end of the first quarter, and then you get another long drive. So the reason we're talking about this is really setting up for today. Penn State UCLA coming into a 9 a.m. local time kickoff as a 28-point underdog, starting fast, playing better, taking a significant step, dominating the opponent this week. How important is that for you from the eye test and all of those metrics to say that this team did take a significant step this week? I guess the high-level view of how this game plays out, is it okay just to get a win, or do they need to show that progress this week in your mind?
I think they need to show a significant step forward from what we've seen up to this point. I think Illinois was a big test, and now you come into a UCLA team that, as you mentioned, just got in at 5 p.m. last night. They've only been on the East Coast for a couple of hours. They're still picking the crusties out of their eyes at the moment. And so it's like you need to come in, set the tone, start fast. I think if you don't start fast and it's maybe 7-0 at the end of the first quarter, I can't say I'm happy with that. I just want to see us come out, put a team away by halftime, and a team that's not not a MAC team. Like this is a good team. I mean, they are a Power 4 team,
right,
but a team that could be without their starting quarterback today. There's a lot of factors as to why UCLA really shouldn't do good today.
Right.
And so I would like to see a dominant victory, and not even just for the fans, but I think as a player, coming into USC next week, and you got to go out there, and there's a lot of adversity you're facing there. You got to have a little bit of swagger going into that type of game. And if you barely eke out a win against UCLA, I don't know how I'm feeling heading into that week as a player. But you throttle everybody, and your starters are out by the third quarter today against UCLA.
Yeah.
Well, then next week I'm feeling really good headed into USC.
This is a question that always comes up. It's going to come up a little bit later in the schedule as well, with obviously having Ohio State at noon on November 2nd, I think it is. Anyway, the first game in November. Trap games. You just mentioned USC next week, how important that game is from all of the different metrics. How real is a trap game to a player? Like, does your focus wax and wane each week, or is it does the coaching staff and do you as a player have the ability to focus the same way and want to win the same way each week, or at least to the level you need to?
I'd say to the level you need to. It's not, I mean, when you have Ohio State the next week, you are looking ahead a little bit. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we have Wisconsin the week before.
I believe,
yeah. That's my trap game. We're at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We're coming off the bye week. We go USC bye week at Wisconsin, and then Ohio State at home. I think the Wisconsin game is going to be that trap game. So that is, I think it is something, especially coming off a bye week in our scenario. But, Coach Franklin, I've talked about this, the 1-0 mentality. He really does do a good job of driving that home. And when you constantly hear that, it does start to resonate. And if you start to talk about, the next week, or really even just anything from that day on, guys are like, come on, don't worry about that. So that he has done a really good job of making sure that the leaders pass that message down. And I think it is helpful for a player when you really are just focused on that day, that game. And like I said, I'm sure the fans find it a little bit corny, but like I said, it really is effective to me. So I am curious to see how this team goes forward after USC. I think that is the first real test. We said Illinois was kind of that heat check. Right. Where's Penn State at? Right. And it's like, okay, we're really good. We made some mistakes. We didn't finish some stuff, but we're a really good team. USC is like, okay, are we going to make the playoffs, essentially? That is where we kind of really figure out that answer.
And it's funny because every time you set a benchmark, there's always the conversation of, well, USC doesn't look impervious either. So until you slay the dragon, until you beat Ohio State at home, there is always going to be a, well, but... on the schedule, or at least in the view of some fans, that it's not, you haven't proven ever that you're going to be that team until you actually prove that you're going to be that team. And until you cross that threshold of beating a team that doesn't have any apparent weaknesses, it doesn't matter.
I don't disagree with you, but I will say this. I think if we get to Ohio State undefeated, and let's just say we lose, I think we're in the playoffs, because you can still essentially maybe lose one more after that too. So I'm just, I think we get past USC and even that Wisconsin, I'm a little worried about maybe an emotional win at USC and then a bye week at Wisconsin. Like that game can get real gritty up in Wisconsin. They're jumping around. I mean, we were shooting 2021 when when it went out there. We barely won, and they had like 2 turnovers inside our 10-yard line. Like it was the famous Jaquan Brisker pick that led. If you remember that, so there was, Wisconsin's they're a decent team. So I definitely would be on the lookout for that. But that stretch of the schedule of bye week, Wisconsin, Ohio State, it's going to be a doozy for Penn State.
I'm so glad, though, that you've been deprogrammed enough that we're talking about the future schedule and we're not going 1-0 and focusing only on UCLA. But I do want to bring it back to UCLA before we get out of this first break here. So what do fans, first time that I think anybody really, 1940? I'm not a historian.
50-something years
50-something, yeah. It's been a while since Penn State has played UCLA, never as a Big Ten opponent. So the first time for most of us in our lifetime seeing these two teams match up. Just from, again, we'll get into the details later. What do you know about this team? What should fans know about UCLA coming into Beaver Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, starting off, their quarterback, Ethan Garbers, he is questionable coming into this game. And I will tell you, I didn't know he was questionable after their game and that he got injured. I didn't hear about it. I turned on the tape, and I'm just saying, this guy is getting demolished right now. I'm like, he's going to get hurt. And then next thing I know, he goes out and he's hurt. I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they have let up 9 sacks in the past 2 games. That offensive line is really shaky. And now with a quarterback that you're either playing with an injured quarterback, and I believe it's his ankle, an injured quarterback, or you're playing with a backup quarterback. So either way, there is some real opportunity for the Penn State D-line to continue what they did last week against a pretty good Illinois offensive line, and just tight end. That whole group was good. And now you have a UCLA team that is not good up front. And like I said, you get an injured quarterback, it's like that's a wounded gazelle, and Abdul Carter's the tiger or lion going after it. So good luck. I mean, that's my biggest thing on UCLA's offense today. I think the D-line should really get after them.
One of the biggest talking points this week, especially on Wednesday during Penn State Open practice, was Nick Singleton was not at the media portion, at least for our availability, for us to see all the players going through the different parts of practice that we get to see each week. For more information on that, go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We've been reporting about that this week. We'll also keep you up to date on the site when it comes to his availability, what we learn about that pregame, and his ability to play today or not if they need him on the field. But that does set up what we're going to be talking about in this week's Penn State practice highlights. We'll be back on the Penn State Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5 and 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Check out your Penn State practice highlights right now. The Penn State Nittany Lions enter October undefeated. That's the good news. However, they're somewhat banged up heading into their lone home game of this month against UCLA today. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, and this is your Penn State Practice Report. Want a weekly look into Penn State's open practice from the leaders in Penn State football coverage? Join Blue White Illustrated right now for $1 and get 2 months of access to practice updates, reports, and more each Wednesday evening. 2 of Penn State's 3 offensive guards left the game last week, presumably after getting poked in the eye through incidental contact from Illinois defensive linemen. One of those players, veteran Sal Wormley, was at practice with his teammates on Wednesday. The other, guard J.B. Nelson, was not. However, that wasn't the absence that fans were most curious about this week. Star running back Nick Singleton was a surprise absence on Wednesday. As expected, Penn State head coach James Franklin was tight-lipped on the subject.
We didn't see Nick at practice today. Is there anything that is going on there that might impact his availability?
No, not at this stage.
Is there anything further you can tell us?
No.
For more detailed reporting on the situation with Singleton, check out Nate Bauer's article from Wednesday at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Defensively, linebacker Dom DeLuca was back at practice with a cast on his thumb as well. But what about the on-field matchup with UCLA this weekend? Penn State isn't the only team with lingering issues coming into the game. As of Wednesday evening, there was still no word on the status of starting Bruins quarterback Ethan Garbers, who suffered an ankle injury. Beyond his status of playing or not playing, UCLA runs a pro-style volume of offensive and defensive concepts. So how can Penn State prepare for all of that, including a potential quarterback change, in 1 week? Don't go looking for solutions to every problem, says head coach James Franklin.
We can't chase ghosts. I think it's getting to a point as coaches and players to understand you're not going to cover it all. But we've done enough throughout training camp and throughout this season that if they do this motion or they line up in this formation or whatever it is, we have rules that account for those things. And okay, we didn't cover this week. There's a chance something's going to show up in this game that we haven't covered. You can't cover it all. It's just impossible to do. So just follow your rules.
We'll see what UCLA has in store for Penn State in just a few hours. No matter what it is, the home team should have a clear advantage between the line. That's your weekly Penn State practice update. More of the Tailgate Show next.
Follow your rules.
We'll see what UCLA has in store for Penn State in just a few hours. What did you see yesterday from the defense?
Defense, not a ton. I got the easy draw yesterday, but Dom DeLuca was back. That was good to see. Jalen Kimber, whom James Franklin referenced as a guy that they hope to get back, he was back. So, restocking the shelves there on defense. Of course, any time that we see a linebacker that's out, it's going to have an impact on the rest of the group, but DeLuca being back certainly helps in that aspect. So not much. We're staying status quo on the defense. That's how we like it over there. Just kind of go through the things. By the way, I don't know if you saw the front page. We talked about the football on a stick the other day to keep guys from jumping off sides. That's there. You can go take a look at that. But no, that's what we got on defense. We got I don't want to say a full shelf, but that's back to sort of what we expect going into this weekend.
As full as it can be when we understand they're missing a couple of pieces that were expected to be a part of the puzzle so far this year. From that linebacker position, obviously, this is an unanswerable question, but with the way Dom DeLuca looked in practice, I know he was the guy everyone was focusing on. Did you get a sense of how he was in the process in terms of, did he look like he was participating like he normally would pre-injury?
Thumbs up there. Yes. He's got it's not quite the Cabinda thumb, but he's got the wrap on his hand and his thumb. So, draw the conclusions as you will. That's where he's at there. At least to get you back to a 2 deep there at all 3 positions. I know we've kind of downplayed the Sam, but Penn State played a decent amount of, probably, was it more Sam this past weekend than any other game that they've played in? We saw Dakari Nelson out there. Yeah, we saw Dakari Nelson out there. So you slide him behind DeLuca, and all of a sudden you've got a 2 deep, and it's been touch and go this year at that position. But it's an interesting. I know you looked at it, but it's an interesting sort of juxtaposition on how that position works, because we kind of phased it out, and then Illinois comes out in a lot of 11 personnel. And were they mostly in 11? Sorry, I was just trying.
They started the game more in 12, so that's why Dakari started, and he played a lot in the first half. But then they had to switch to throwing the ball.
Yeah. So if you watch the first play, Cam Miller came out to start, and Illinois came out in 12, and they rushed Cam off, and they brought Dakari on, which is why Dakari got a start, which is pretty cool, for a redshirt freshman in a new position. But still, it's matchup dependent. It's personnel heavy. James Franklin made a comment last night after practice and talking about the communication and how they're working through the communication issues. They think that most of that is behind them, but what they're trying to do is call that defense at the last second, which see what Illinois, or I guess UCLA this weekend, see what personnel they're bringing out, and then make your call adjusting to that. And then if they have a formation, adjust to that, and sort of go from there, but get it in as late as possible, which kind of seems counterproductive, but at the same time, you want as much information as you can before you put that final call in there. So I think that's what they've worked through. And, as we spin off to Dakari Nelson starting, I think that's an interesting point from last night that's probably a little bit overlooked.
At your tailgate. Get the expert's view of today's game. Here's Landon Tengwall as he gives you the key matchups. Brought to you by Stalker Chevrolet. For your next vehicle purchase, come to Stalker Chevrolet and save with low interest rates. And remember, only at Stalker Chevrolet will you get the Stalker Advantage with the purchase of any new vehicle.
Welcome back into the Penn State Tailgate Show. I am Landon Tengwall, giving you guys the key matchup of today. And for me, it is the Penn State defensive line versus the UCLA offensive line. I think they are going to get after Garbers or whoever they put back there at quarterback. And I will read you off this tweet from Denai Dennis Sutton from last night. It was, I think, around 9 p.m. He said, "God, please watch over me. As for tomorrow, I show what Denai Dennis Sutton is capable of." I'm going to be honest. I think I texted T. Frank when he tweeted this out, and I said, I think Denai has been watching the UCLA tackles tonight because he's clearly feeling good about it. Dude, I'm just gonna shoot you straight. I mean, they're awful. Their offensive line is horrible.
Yeah.
I was with little side note. I was with Freddie Mitchell, who was a star. I think he was All-American at UCLA in the late '90s. He played for the Eagles for about 4 years, if you know him. And I was on with him with Fox yesterday, and he wasn't even talking trash. Like, he was an alum. He's riding in with the team. And he didn't even want to say he even thought they were going to win. So I think even the guys around, they're not feeling it, dude. They're not feeling it. I think they know what is coming today. And I think it's all going to start with the Penn State defensive line up front.
I just want to correct Denai's tweet a little bit. I think God should be watching over whoever the quarterback is, because last time Denai took a quarterback and ended his season that they played an offensive line like this. So I understand what he's saying, but we need to be looking out for the people that the 270-pound defensive lineman is going to be landing on today, because, not only do they have an offensive line that struggles, but the left tackle was in and out of the game against Oregon last week, I believe. So they're potentially even down further in that particular area. And I think it's a great position to start with, because the QB situation for UCLA is something we talked about this week. James Franklin talked about the not trying to chase ghosts, getting as much information as you can to do a good job of preparing for a quarterback that you've never seen before, but not trying to chase ghosts. So when you have a quarterback potentially that is a running quarterback instead of a quarterback that is a passer, and a pure drop-back NFL-style passer in this NFL-style offense, how much does that change the offensive lineman's job in terms of protection, game plan, scheme, run game, all those things?
I mean, it makes it a little bit easier when the quarterback's not a sitting duck, but also when a quarterback is mobile, sometimes he can kind of run his way into a sack. Let's say you have someone blocked up perfectly and they are a running quarterback at heart, and they just decide to shoot out of the pocket, and I have him right here on the edge, and then he just lunges and makes the tackle because my quarterback wants to run out of a clean... Or you get the hold. Or a hold, exactly. Because my quarterback decides he wants to run out of a clean pocket. That is a real thing. So I would say, you don't think too much about it when you're offensive lineman, but let's say you play for someone, let's just say like Lamar Jackson. It probably does change your blocking style over time, but if you are changing back and forth between a quarterback, a backup quarterback, you're not thinking that much about it.
Right.
I think the only way it changes, like I said, if you're a left tackle that's played with a running quarterback for 3 or 4 years, then maybe you start to kind of feel that. But if it's your first game with them, it's really, you're going to block it the same way.
So continuing this conversation about the offensive line, I took a look at them this week myself. I wouldn't say that there is as big of a matchup disadvantage as Illinois' interior. I thought the left guard last week for Illinois was highly susceptible to Zane Durant, but I also see some more players that are pretty susceptible to Zane Durant on the interior. So do you think it's another day, not just for the tackles, Abdul Carter and Denai Sutton against those players, but is Zane Durant in line for a game as well today?
I think everybody's susceptible to Zane Durant at this point.
Right?
That's what it feels like. I actually got the chance to sit down with him on Monday night, and it was, he's a very humble guy, and he just goes out there, and it really feels like, in just what he said to me, that he has kind of changed his mindset, and he is going in and attacking every single day with just a relentless work ethic and just getting after it. And you see it directly on the field.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun in the offseason when you can tell a guy really flips the switch. Going into, a year 3, year 4 is normally when it happens.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this guy is way different. And I think that's, Zane was always a good player, but he's a game wrecker this year. And we haven't had a game wrecker at defensive tackle in a long time. It's been a minute. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity for the guys on the inside. And like you said, my favorite matchup is probably UCLA's right tackle. I've just seen him get beat like a drum a couple times.
Yeah.
I'm excited about Abdul, Denai, whoever wants to line up over there. So T. Frank's going to have to hold me back soon.
So I'm going to go on a bit of a philosophical rant here. And this is going to touch on a lot of coach speak. Here's the thing. Coaches always talk about effort. They always talk about attention to detail. They always talk about the things you can control, Landon. And with a guy like Zane Durant, you talk about his mentality shift and what it sounds like is just growing up and understanding what's important and how to do these things and then applying it. You've been pre-selected for your talent. That part is taken care of. You have the physical talent. And depending on how talented you are, you can then maximize that with your effort and your execution and your attention to detail. So it's really that part of it that takes a good player and makes them an all Big Ten player. It's not the physical ability, because if you're a recruiter to Penn State, we know that part. It's about what you do with it on a day-to-day basis to maximize that.
It is, and I'll give you from a player perspective. And you say, how could you not maximize it with that facility that, when you get in a route and maybe you don't play your freshman year, everything doesn't go your way. It is hard when you're in Penn State and there's all these all the distractions. I don't need to list them off. It's to not go a different route and not just whatever. You can start to eat bad. Maybe don't work out as much. Don't take care of your body. It's like, whatever. I'm not really playing as much.
Yeah.
So it is hard to and then if you're doing really well, it's like, I don't need to change anything. I'm doing really well. And then it doesn't stay consistent because you are not being consistent every day.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you, there are certain guys that always, like KJ Winston came in, and there's a reason he played early because he was like that from the jump.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys, it takes a little bit for them to really understand what they need to do day in and day out in and around the facility. And I think Zane Durant has fully figured that out. He was always someone, obviously, really, really great guy.
Yeah.
But he has really put all the pieces to the puzzle.
And it does take some time for a defensive lineman who came in at 265 pounds to get to 290 pounds. Again, that takes the consistency in the weight room that we don't see. That takes the diet, the nutrition, to do it all the right way and to do I think science is like 1.5 pounds per week you can gain of lean muscle. So it just physically takes a long time, and if you accelerate that with nutrition and the fact that 18-year-old men can probably beat that, especially if you're, again, super talented, but it does take a certain amount of time for certain positions to pop and to really reach that. So when you get guys that have a third-year breakout, it is a part of that conversation, and that's where Zane Durant, Abdul Carter, and Denai Denison all are this particular year in their development curve. So looking beyond just the offensive line and that combination, what else can you tell fans about this offense and where you think Penn State has some advantages to maybe start fast and not give up a first drive touchdown like we talked about in the previous segment?
Yeah, they don't run the ball either. They haven't rushed for over 100 yards through 4 games.
Well, if that's it, then yeah.
Yeah, well, no, it's just, they really, and it's not that they just don't do it well.
Right.
There was I believe against LSU, they rushed for like 13 yards, something like that. They are not at all, I actually have it right here, I have my stats versus Hawaii, 71 rushing yards, Indiana, 96 rushing yards, LSU, 14 rushing yards, and Oregon, 47 rushing yards.
Did you say 14 yards?
14 rushing yards against LSU. I triple checked that one.
Wow.
And so they average 57 rushing yards a game. They don't run the ball well.
Yeah.
So, make them pass it, make them use their backup quarterback, their injured quarterback, and let the dogs hunt. I think today's game plan really is simple. And you know what I'm thinking about doing? We've talked about Abdul Carter and kind of where to put him, how creative to be. Coach Franklin did come out and mention, hey, don't be surprised if you see us be a little bit more creative with him.
Yeah.
We saw that last week. We had Abdul Carter line up in a spy. That's where he got both of his sacks, meaning that he was mugged up against the center or the guard in a linebacker position stance, and then ended up just tracking Luke Altmaier down last week, and that's how he got both his sacks. But, coming into this week, like I said, you maybe got a little bit of a hurt quarterback. Play Abdul around, spy him around, let him blitz late, use his athletic ability, use that acceleration. And so I don't know if you wanted to get into this yet, but if we're talking defense, we might as well have the Abdul Carter conversation. Yeah. And my biggest thing is what I say is Abdul does not like to be touched. It's clear. It is evident. He doesn't, he's not big on contact because he's always, every move is a duck, a dip, something away. It's not at you and trying to really attack. Yeah. So why put him at defensive end where you are basically mandating, hey, you're getting hands put on you unless you just straight up beat the guy off the ball.
Which he tries to dip back against zone all the time anyway. He's still trying to set the edge by missing contact.
Exactly. So, why not mix it up? You can put him at the end, third, especially a third down, definitely let him rush the quarterback. But move him around. He got a really good win. He lined up over the left guard that everybody was beating last week, but had a really nice spin move on him.
He took 2 blockers out with that, by the way, which is why Jalen Reed got that sack.
Shout out T. Frank. Check him out on Twitter. He did a breakdown on that one, so I enjoyed that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt. It was great. I always learn something.
But I wanna talk about Abdul and that particular, using him across all the different formations, but the job being the same. And this is something that is really important to me, of the conversation about moving him around last week. He played off-ball linebacker and then blitzed. So there were a couple times he played D end and dropped. So that is a part of the defense from the defensive end position anyway. But they're not using him as a run defender off the ball or a coverage defender off the ball. What they're doing is they're lining him up in diverse situations and allowing him to attack different players on the offensive side of the offensive line. So to me, it is still he's a D end playing off ball, or he's a D end mugging the A gap. Those are things from a what are you doing and how are you doing it. His role isn't changing, it's just where you're lining him up. And I think that's really important for fans to understand, that he's not going to take over for Tony Rojas and you're going to move Tony Rojas to the other linebacker position. It is, we are using his strengths to the best of their abilities if you're the Penn State defensive staff, without putting him in a position to fail, essentially. Because on that fourth down drive at the end of the game, or that fourth quarter drive where Illinois was trying to come back, he and Denai did a stunt where in coverage, the quarterback breaks the pocket, and they do what they do. They started running at the quarterback, and suddenly there's an open receiver. So this is not the Micah Parsons situation with the Dallas Cowboys, his rookie year, where they're literally playing him at two positions. At least what we've seen so far, it has been, let's move him around and have him do the same job.
Yeah, and that's where you saw Abdul Carter last year, when you loved that 7-up look, where it was really confusing to defenses, and they always ran it on third down. And so Abdul Carter got all his sacks last year. I think he had 4.5 sacks of just being moved around at all different positions, lined up over the center, like you said. But that is Abdul. That is what he does. You don't need to drop Abdul into coverage, but let him hunt. He's a hunter. Yeah. That is where you use his acceleration. That is where you put him in good positions and allow him to go get the quarterback. So I'm excited to see how we basically continue to use Abdul and be unique. And I think the cool part about having Abdul moving him all over is you can't really game plan for that. You don't know exactly where he's going to line up. Yeah. So, you run certain stunts and twists, and you try to get Abdul free, because Abdul needs a lot less space than the average person because of his acceleration and his bend. Yeah. So he only needs a little bit of space to get through to that quarterback. So hopefully Abdul racks up a couple more sacks today.
So the next thing that I think we're monitoring week to week without KJ Winston out there and trying to get back to the base defense, which is to play Jalen Reed down near the line of scrimmage. I don't want to attack from that angle this conversation. UCLA runs 3 receivers 74% of the time, roughly, in their first 4 games, whatever it's been for them. So, who do you think we see this week? Because this has been the mix of players that have been that 11th defender. Dejon Lane, Cam Miller, Zion Tracy, Dakari Nelson. They have 4 different options in the lineup. Obviously, Dom DeLuca comes back this week, we're expecting. So that's a 5th player. What do you think is the lineup this week, and how does that conversation take shape throughout this game, so that at the end of it, we're talking about X coming out of this game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it'll be really nice to get Jay Reed down around the line of scrimmage when he is closer to the ball. It feels like he can obviously be more impactful, and he is really good. And now you're missing KJ Winston making those tackles in the flats. Yeah. That's something that Jalen Reed can kind of replace. So now you look, I think Dejon Lane is going to continue to play a lot. Mm-hmm. I think the coaches have a ton of confidence in him, and we've talked about this. Coach Franklin greenlit him at the beginning of the season, saying, hey, you are going to burn your red shirt this year. So it's clear they thought Dejon Lane was going to play a lot, and normally that means, hey, if you're greenlit as a true freshman, if there is one injury, you're probably playing. And so I think that's how Coach Franklin thought of Dejon Lane from the beginning, and now he's going to be out there, I think, a lot and be a really impactful player on the back end of this defense. Yeah. But I will say it's not KJ Winston, though, just because as talented as Dejon Lane is a true freshman, you do not have that experience that a guy like KJ Winston, where he is in his 3rd year and has done this. To me, the conversation about getting Jalen Reed down to the line of scrimmage is more about Zakee Wheatley, who, speaking of the devil, his dad is walking by Zakee
right
Wheatley
now.
Senior,
there. They need to find. So this, I wrote about this at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com after KJ Winston's injury and the whole conversation of how the defense works, where players play, and there are 3 different safety positions. There's the field safety position. That's where Dejon Lane is playing. That is more of a free safety, if you want to think about it. They're not in run support as much. They play more coverage, more slot coverage. Then you've got the boundary safety. That's the veteran position. That is the run support position. There's no real free and strong kind of correlation to my understanding of like a pure free and strong in college because of the way that the field reacts to the formations, but that's more of your veteran, your guy who's strong against the run physically and mentally. And then you got the Lion position, which is that hybrid. Is it a linebacker? Is it a slot corner? Is it a safety? It's whatever you want it to be in that particular situation. Dejon Lane, as a freshman, it would shock me if they play him at that boundary position. So that means Zakee Wheatley, who has struggled a little bit in run defense this year, that's the part of this that unlocks getting Jalen Reed back down to that position. Because I think as a freshman, you might trust Dejon Lane to play that free safety position. It's more of a preventive role to begin with. But you need somebody to be a run enforcer, and Jalen Reed has been that, but they need Zakee Wheatley to be that. Do you think he can do that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he has the ability, and like you said, up to this point, just has struggled a little bit with tackling. And, you know, when you are a little bit of a slimmer guy, when you look at someone like Zakee Wheatley compared to Jalen Reed is a lot thicker, a lot more filled out. Yeah. Zakee, he's like, I call him the Slenderman, man. So, like, it is, it's a little bit harder to tackle. So we're going to need them to step up. I mean, like I said, losing KJ Winston was really, really big. So we're going to have to count on some guys. But Zakee Wheatley, like you said, in run support, going to have to step up a little bit.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about the Penn State offense and some of the conversation around this particular game, what we expect from the offense, and talk a little bit about the UCLA team and some of the things that I saw watching film this week that I'm not a big fan of, Landon. That's coming up next on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, powered by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. We'll be right back on 99.5 The Bus, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Before we get to that, it is the Coach's Corner.
Press conferences are boring, right?
That's why we've set aside the most important stuff for you.
It's Coach's Corner, powered by Your Cigar Den and Monte Cristo Lounge, with free, easy in and out parking for all your tailgating needs. Check out Your Cigar Den's new Casa Cuban Lounge on Colonnade Boulevard next to Wegmans.
We are 1/3 of the way into the season, and Penn State remains undefeated. A perfect record does not mean the Nittany Lions have been perfect on the year, however. Starting kicker Sanders Zahadak missed 2 field goals in the 21-7 victory over Illinois this past Saturday. His season total now sits at 2-5 with a career 3-for-9 mark. Head coach James Franklin pulled Zahadak from PAT duty after the final touchdown late in the fourth quarter, opting for redshirt freshman Ryan Barker instead. Many Penn State fans are now wondering, will Zahadak lose the starting job for a second straight season?
Sander had won the job. He had won the job during training camp. He had won the job this season. All the data and the statistics back that up. During the spring, it was a closer battle, and then Sander just slowly but surely took the lead. But I think everybody felt comfortable that was the right decision. So we'll factor all of that in this week in making the decision. It will be a competition.
The other negative from an overwhelmingly positive night came on the offensive line. Both starters Sal Wormley and backup J.B. Nelson went out injured in the matchup, but both are expected back for today's UCLA matchup. Even with the 2 missing time, the O-line dominated the line of scrimmage, and James picked out one man that deserved heaps of praise for his play so far this season.
I think Nick Dawkins is a big storyline there as well. A guy that's been kind of waiting for his opportunity and his time, and we had high expectations for him, and I actually think he's probably playing better than we anticipated. Not only physically, but also mentally in terms of calls and leadership. He's been really good.
With a dominant offensive line, it allows the dual-headed monster in the backfield to explode. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen led the way to a 239-yard rushing day for the Nittany Lions. For James Franklin, the focus turned to Katron himself. The 2022 4-star recruit from IMG Academy has shown flashes and stretches of brilliance over his Penn State career. From the outside, 13's career has been straightforward for success. Coach Franklin shed a little more light on the budding star tailback.
I'm really proud of Katron in so many different ways. And to be honest with you, Katron is always, really just kind of maybe some bad luck, but historically with his time here, he's always had some lingering injury in the offseason that I think has hurt some of his development. He's one of the more natural football players that we got. It was really that way when he showed up on campus.
Speaking of budding stars, Abdul Carter showed up and showed out against the Fighting Illini. 2 sacks, a forced fumble, 4 tackles for loss, and more proved why Carter is a projected first-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. The defensive end earned multiple weekly honors, from Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week to Senior Bowl Co-Defensive Player of the Week and more. Carter was originally a linebacker, but James only sees more to come from his star, newly named defensive end.
The transition from linebacker defensive end is a significant one. He's done some really good things already, but I think as he gets more comfortable there, and then like you saw last week, we start to put more on his plate where we're doing different things, whether it's just one time lining him up on the left, another time lining him up on the right at defensive end. Just that alone, so they can't game plan him, know where exactly he's going to be.
That was your Penn State Coach's Corner. More from the Tailgate Show in a moment.
Yeah, and of course, like you said, 2 months for $1 with promo code PSU1. Ryan, now we get into the meat of it, the recruiting list for this coming weekend. There are players, as we mentioned, the next time they get a chance to come to a Penn State football game, it's November 2nd. It'll be the whiteout. So do you view these players as more or less priorities? I guess, how do you view this particular list, given it's a noon, it's UCLA, but it is the last in this homestand?
Well, there's one really important player that we'll probably save for the premium podcast, so I'll tease that right off the bat. When I'm looking at 2026 right now, I don't see, to me, when you're looking at that 2026 list, Jackson Ford might be the one that they're most interested in right now because he camped. They have good information. He's having a good season. There's other guys on this list, like Marlon Bright, for example. I think he's a guy they're intrigued with. Maybe Jermaine Kinsler, although, most schools seem to like him at D-line. Penn State kind of leans a little bit more towards O-line. So there's a lot of questions, I would say, as far as who they firmly really want out of this weekend's visitor list. I think that they have a lot of talented guys coming, but as Sean always points out, and as I should point out probably more, evaluations are going to play a massive part here over the next 2-3 months. So let's see where that goes. I do want to mention Ford, though, because I thought he had a great camp at Penn State back in July. Really intriguing player. Some schools like him as a tight end. Some schools like him as a DN. Penn State's leaning more towards a defensive end. 6'3", 240 out of Malvern Prep. Guy that isn't rated yet by On3. But the feedback we're getting is really positive. And I don't know if he'll be, a 4-star guy or anything like that, but I think this is a player who, as we continue to learn more, could certainly be a guy that continues to rise up the rankings. Just went to Michigan a couple weeks ago. Seems like more and more prominent programs are starting to notice. Michigan has already offered, aside from that, it's been a lot of the regional schools, Rutgers, Maryland, West Virginia, for example. So I think this is a recruitment that Penn State, it's really early. I don't want to say they should win. We got to learn a lot more, but certainly one that they'll be in the mix with. Curious to see and learn more about his interest in Michigan following his visit 2 weeks ago. But to me, when I look at just, again, the 2026 guys who are absolutely confirmed for this weekend, Ford certainly has my attention.
Who else? Or Fitz, do you have any thoughts on that particular situation? Obviously, we have 2023 highlights, so I'm curious to go and source some more highlights to see how he's developed. But in those, he definitely doesn't look like the same athlete Penn State normally tracks for the tight end position. But a good defensive end, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think, defensive end all the way, to be honest with you. But you look at how he's built, and he kind of has that, I don't want to say 5-tech build, but he's a bigger kid, but he's got good length. He's got a lot that you like there in terms of where he can fit in. I think he was almost 240 pounds when he got here this summer, but you get that kind of explosiveness. He went on a roll, man. Michigan offered not too long after that. So there's some really good things happening in his recruitment. And as Ryan said, he's having a good year. So
with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. I am Thomas Frank Carr, former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall with me. If you hear that in the background, Big Noon Kickoff is basically in our ear to the right. So if you want to come say hi to us, follow the really loud noise, and then you'll find us right in the shadow of it. We're having a great time here on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We talked about the defense. We talked about how a lot of those things are going to play out today in our view of this particular game coming up. Now we're talking about the offense. And so last week Penn State dominated. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. They got whatever they wanted. If you can average like 7 yards a carry in the first half of a football game, that is pretty much the opposite of what UCLA has been doing so far this season, Landon. But Illinois designed their defense to make Penn State work for it last week. What's in store for the team this week?
I think you make a good point that Illinois defense does not let up a lot of passing yards. They keep everything underneath. Now, I think the UCLA defense is a little bit different. They are just not very good in the secondary. And then on top of that, their defensive line really lacks the pressure. So that is why you see these quarterbacks against UCLA just having a great time.
Yeah.
They are just lighting them up. The past 3 games against Oregon, they give up 278 passing yards and then 300, and like 10 TDs all combined through those 3 games. I mean, if you're a quarterback going against the UCLA defense, you have 5 seconds to sit back there and deliver a pass. So you're in a really good world if you're Drew Allar. I just gave my bold prediction out on Twitter. Check it out, at Landon Tengwall, that Drew Allar will set a single game record for himself for passing yards today. His current record is 325 against West Virginia week 1 last year.
Yeah.
So that is kind of my prediction. I think he will have a lot of time. The UCLA defensive line has not had a sack in 3 games.
Yeah. So their deficiency there, I think, is compounded by what they do defensively. I was saying this on our BWI live show on Thursday. Usually when I'm watching some film, you pretty quickly get a sense of what a team is, right? So you see a trend in the way they call a defense or the way they call a drive. And with UCLA, I had absolutely no idea offensively or defensively what their identity was, because Eric Bieniemy, pro-style offensive coordinator, Ethan Garber's sitting in the pocket, delivering some really good throws when he has protection in that first scripted drive, and then suddenly the wheels fall off after they get through their scripted plays. Defensively, they're running cover 1, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6, cover 2, covering nobody. Because when you're running a pro-style defense and you have part-time players who are not practicing in meetings all day, and you're going to Spanish, intensive Spanish 101 or whatever.
It's not easy.
You don't have time to learn, hey, am I the Tampa 2 in this cover 6, or do I need to watch the field for what? Like, you just don't have time for the details in every single one of these defenses. So these are good defensive players, in my opinion. I think they've got a good defense. Their run defense, somebody pointed out in the chat on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, they do a great job of, like, being talented. They have guys and bodies that can fight with Penn State, but they just make mistakes because I think they're being asked to do too much.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When you're talking about a defense and who they are, you have something that you generally run. Not every single play, but that is your base. And if you don't have that as a UCLA defender, it gets hard because you're trying to, like you said, remember all these different rules. And you have all these different coverages from different formations and all these different rules to learn for all these coverages. And like you said, these guys are going to English 15 and, have to do a lot of other stuff. So it is not very easy. Now, talking about Ethan Garber's their quarterback, you are absolutely right. He delivers some real dimes.
Yeah.
And it's not even just kind of throughout the game. It's like, wow, that was a beautiful pass. But then he will just make the most boneheaded interception mistake.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, what was that? And it's probably because he's so scared that he's going to get killed by his offensive line.
Yeah.
Because, they just let him get, and I'm not talking normal sacks. Like, it was like a WWE, like, drive pile fest into the ground. Like, it was ridiculous what was happening to Ethan Garber's out there on the field.
Can I share a story with you?
Yeah.
So I watch a lot of film, and I've watched a lot of different offenses. I've watched a lot of different quarterbacks. I feel like I've put in the time to have the eyes to understand what I'm looking at. But at the same time, Landon, there is that kind of like numbness you get of watching film, of the expectation of what you're supposed to see. And then every once in a while it hits me, and it hit me watching the UCLA offense. And I'm watching Ethan Garber stand in the pocket, and I'm like, how does anyone do this? How does any quarterback, how does Drew Allar operate an offense? How does a quarterback see anything? And then I realized, oh, wait, it's because this maelstrom is not normal. The thing around him that's collapsing on him like a black hole, like a dying star, that's not how all offensive lines operate.
That's a good point. It's not, and that is why Drew Allar is succeeding very well this season. But it also is that, like, Ethan Garber's, he's just scared, and when you are scared that your offensive line is going to get you hurt, you're not living in a good world as
Yeah.
a passer in any way, shape, or form. And I will tell you, have you ever seen, they've put like a camera on a quarterback's helmet and just see what they have to see in the pocket?
I've seen the ump one before.
It is so hard.
Yeah.
Like when you look at it, because you know, we see the camera, we have the height. It's like, oh, he's wide open down there.
Right.
Well, when you are 5'10", let's say you're like 5'11", you're like a Russell Wilson, whatever, you can't even see over that. So
Yeah.
it is playing quarterback. There is a reason they get paid that much money.
Yeah, to be able to, the spatial awareness, not to just understand where the pass rushers are, but to then keep it like as a subconscious routine in your brain while you're diagnosing the defense and the coverage. And every time we talk about Drew Allar, and every time I try to tell fans that when he doesn't have a good game, like, even if he doesn't have a good game, the process I'm watching is different than other quarterbacks, where he's able to find, diagnose, and attack. It's just the execution of those things week to week that I think sometimes doesn't manifest the way you would expect. But I have a higher threshold for him because I see those things from him. I have a higher expectation of what he can do, and that's what I'm expecting this game. I'm the same with you. I think he should have a big game this week.
Yeah, and let's talk about what a quarterback has to do, just for the people to really understand how difficult it is. When you snap the ball, and you might know a little bit pre-snap, but you have to diagnose the defense. Hey, what is it? Is it cover one, cover two? I mean, normally you have an idea between one or the other. You have to quickly figure that out, but also keep in mind each read. In your mind, you have 1, 2, 3. You have to go through your reads and see that. You also have to worry about the protection in front of you. There is a lot when you are the quarterback of a team that you have to worry about. But Drew Allar has done a fantastic job up to this point doing that. He has 864 yards, 8 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. I think that is the biggest stat. He is still taking care of the football. But as you mentioned, the offense and how Drew is operating looks completely different than last year.
Yeah, and so to go back to kind of the conversation about this particular team, and maybe the expectations I had going into that Illinois game, Illinois played a lot of cover one, which means man coverage for those out there that are not, it is man, not zone. But as James Franklin talked about on Monday, they played more zone than Penn State was expecting. If you go back and you look at some of those plays, they're running a lot of plays and a lot of formations that beat press man coverage. And suddenly they're running all these underneath routes, all these mesh routes, all these combat routes, rubs, picks, things like that into zone. And those are not as effective. So we talk about the players involved in the game plan each week from a passing perspective. In a game plan like that, you are involving Tyler Warren more, you're involving Liam Clifford more, because you are doing those catch and run underneath, I want my guy where I want him, and those veteran players, the Julian Fleming, are involved. And to me, part of the offensive struggles last week were they didn't get what they were expecting, and that put them a little bit off kilter. They still scored on that first drive, but then they came back and adjusted, and they didn't really hit the adjustment. This week, I think they're going to get what they want unless UCLA did something drastically different. Who do you think is involved this week, given the defense we just described?
Yeah, I think it's Trey Wallace is going to be back in action. And I think
buddy.
After week 1, it was like, hey, we have a number 1 guy, let's go. Well, past 2 games, haven't really seen a ton from him. Hasn't really been super involved. We get our weekly deep shot to Mari Evans. That is coming
happen
today. That is absolutely, whether it's a streak, a post, whatever it is, Amari Evans is getting a deep shot today.
Anytime he lines up in the slot, you should be terrified if you're the defensive safety.
Yeah, a nice slot, a nice post from the slot position from Amari Evans today. We'll just call that here on the show.
Can that be my bold prediction?
That can be your bold
All
prediction.
Right.
Amari Evans will get a post deep shot touchdown.
So bold. It's happened every week. I am so bold.
Maybe DPI. We'll get into that conversation in a second here. But I do think that it's Trey Wallace's day to get back involved. I think they want to establish a number 1 wide receiver, and this is something that we have talked about. What team wins a national championship that doesn't have a true number 1 playmaker? Even Michigan, that ran the ball consistently, they still had Roman Wilson, who could make a play and was clearly their number 1 guy. I think if you're talking about Penn State, you're okay with wide receiver by committee, but that doesn't make you a national championship contender when you are wide receiver by committee, in my opinion.
I think there were certain situations where I think Drew was trying to get Trey involved early. I don't remember if it was the Kent State game where he almost threw that interception into underneath coverage, because I think they are trying and get Trey the ball. And I had this conversation with people over at the Blue White Illustrated message board. By the way, subscribe right now for just $1. Get 2 months of access to premium content, including our film breakdowns and our discussions about these things where I nerd out. I don't have an off switch. That happens everywhere I am about football. If you're designing plays for Trey Wallace, if you're designing plays for Tyler Warren and Omari Evans. But your number one receiver is Trey Wallace, and you expect him to get out open kind of just in the function of the offense. Is he still your number one receiver? How do you view that? Do they need to design more things specifically to get him the ball? Because I feel like they do that for those other two, and then Trey is like, he'll get the ball because he's the number one receiver.
Yeah, no, I think you do scheme up. You're looking at this UCLA defense, and like you said, you don't really know what you're going to get. But I think no matter what with Trey Wallace, you're going to get a mismatch. So give him a couple opportunities. I mean, we talked about his ability to win those 50-50 balls. I'll never forget. We talked about, you were mentioning Spanish earlier. I was in Spanish with Trey, and I actually leaned over. I said, hey, what's your vertical? And he said it's about 40 inches. 40-inch vertical. And it's like, let's give him a shot. Let's give him, so throw some balls up to him. Like, when you have a guy like that can just go win you 50-50 balls, give him a couple more opportunities. So that is what I would like to see that. But yes, I would like to see some plays schemed open for Trey Wallace. You think about in week 1 against West Virginia when Drew Allar hit Trey Wallace on that 50-yard touchdown. He was on a nice skinny post, and Drew Allar, he knew what he had. It was cover 3, and Drew Allar hit him right in between the linebacker and the high safety. And that was kind of, pre-play. I think Drew knew he was going to go there if he had cover 3, and he did. I want more routes like that kind of game plan for Trey Wallace to take something and take it to the house.
Well, that the Illinois game, I was expecting once they got they realized they were going to be getting that zone coverage. Cover 3, that's what they want. They run the ball to get a less numbers in the deep part of the field, right? So you only have one safety, 2 corners in cover 3 trying to cover the entirety of the field, and that opens up those seams, up the hash marks for a guy like Trey Wallace. They just didn't take as many deep shots as I was expecting, and I think that was part of coming out of the game. My evaluation of Drew Allar was partly because he didn't have enough opportunities to do stuff like that against the zone team, Landon. I think that's another part of this. This is a good matchup for Drew, where he's really good against zones, especially, as you said, when there's no pass rush.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I want to have this conversation. How do you feel about his game from last week? I think I need to pull up his stats, but, like, he took care of the football.
Yeah.
I will say that. That was my biggest thing. It wasn't there, and he really didn't force it too much. I mean, obviously there was a couple iffy throws, but he played a game manager role.
He's never bad. Drew is, even in the games you think he's bad, he's never a bad quarterback. And that's, again, this is the unfair part of, I think he's going to the NFL this year, so from an evaluation standpoint, I want to see him do NFL level things. And so when he doesn't, that is kind of a step, I don't want to say a step back, but it is not a step towards that concrete lock of this dude is playing at a different level. And so it probably is a little bit unfair that he played a good game last week, but I thought there were opportunities where he could have stuck the dagger in early in that game, and I think he can do that this week. And that's really the thing is, like, if they come out and they play these coverages and they make a mistake, I want to see him make them pay for that with merciless precision. And I think he's capable of that, and I think this offense has the pieces to do that and really kind of put a stamp on, hey, this is a top 10 team. Do you think that I think that's really the conversation about last week is, did they really make an emphatic statement, we are a top 10 team, this team is going to the playoff, so get used to it?
Yeah, they did not, and I don't think you can emphatically say that today, but what today does is leads you into USC with just a boatload of confidence. And if you go through today and win by 2 touchdowns against a UCLA team that's pretty bad, and it takes you a while to get going, I don't think you go into USC with the same confidence as if you came out and Drew Allar has 3 touchdowns and 250 yards by half, and we basically get to sit him, halfway through the third quarter. I think those type of games would be drastically different for Drew. So I'm excited to see it. I hope we take some shots. I would test the hell out of this UCLA defense. Let Drew air the ball out and work out some of those, as we talked about earlier, those underthrows. Put some air under that ball and get it there. Let your wide receiver run under it and make a play.
We haven't talked about him yet today. Trey Wallace, Tyler Warren, those are the 2 guys that I think have an opportunity because of what we just discussed of guys that can run up the middle of the field or that can attack the weaknesses of a defense. Tyler Warren is the guy they're designing plays for. He is the number 1 target in this offense, even if your number 1 receiver is Trey Wallace. I think both those guys have an opportunity for a big game today. But I want to ask you what you thought about, we got to see Khalil Dinkins now for another week. What did you think of Khalil Dinkins and his work last week?
I think he's good. I think obviously coming off an injury, it takes a little bit of time to get back into the swing of things. But I always thought Khalil was a very good blocker, and I think that's something that is bred from a tight end room. Where I'll tell you, Ty Howe is their coach, who played center. He played offensive line here at Penn State.
Yeah.
So when the tight ends are done with practice, or when we have these little walkthroughs and stuff like that, the tight ends go over to get extra work with Ty Howe. But they don't do receiving drills, T. Frank. They are blocking their butt off, and they're over there straining. I mean, in a good posture, good stance, wide stance, that type of thing. Ty Howe takes pride in his tight ends being able to block, and I think we are getting that from Khalil Dinkins. There was a play where Katron Allen scored that touchdown. We ran it right up the middle, and he just bulldozed in.
Yeah.
We had 3 tight ends on the field. That's called 13 personnel. 1 running back, 3 tight ends. Each tight end, even Luke Reynolds, shout out Luke Reynolds, got a hat on a hat, drove their man, and did not let their guy impact the play in any way. I think one of them actually pancaked them. So, I mean, the tight ends are blocking these guys with vengeance, man.
I don't know how we got an hour and 2 minutes into this show, and I haven't asked you about Anthony Donko last week. Oh my! The oversight by the show host here. Please, just go off about the job that Anthony Donko did last week.
Yeah, Anthony Donko has just been locked. I mean, he's reminding me a lot. I don't mean to get ahead of myself. It's Olu Fashanu, very similar to that, where it took him a little bit longer to come on, and I don't think he moves just as well as Olu. But Anthony Donko is locking guys down in pass pro, and he is a mauler in the run game. And we talked about it, going back to last year. We saw him a little bit in the bowl game, and it was like he was pancaking guys when you could tell he didn't even really know what he was doing.
I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to hit you.
He's like a newborn baby deer out there, but like huge. So he's like killing people. And now you see he had an off season. He had a spring ball. He's really starting to understand what he needs to do and getting comfortable at right tackle. He was never a right tackle. He was a left guard.
Yeah.
And now he's a right tackle. That is very, very different. So next thing you know, Anthony Donko comes in and is dominating at right tackle. And I think that is great because there was a big question mark as to who was going to fill in for Caden Wallace and Olu Fashanu, and that we were going to take a huge step back. It really doesn't feel like we have taken a huge step back, and Anthony Donko is a big part of that.
I want to continue this conversation about the offensive line in just a little bit, but I do want to point out something that you just said that I think is a massive statement for Phil Trautwein, but also just how much of an outlier Anthony Donko is. I want to take you back to when I saw him at Light Ridge High School. Back when he was first playing football. Now, he was young to football. He didn't play a whole lot of football. I think they started the football program at Light Ridge when he was a sophomore maybe a junior. He didn't know how to play football. He didn't, you remember Bud Dupree for the Pittsburgh Steelers? I always thought he had the best seat in the house to watch football because he would run around and watch other people make plays. Anthony didn't block anybody half the time because he was thinking more than he was playing. And that was reflected, by the way. He was not the tackle. There were 2 tackles that came in, Javen Williams and Alex Burkmeyer. They put Anthony at left guard because they thought, this is a guy that takes time to develop. He needs that time to season. Probably, even if he has the athletic, the measurables, all those things, we're not seeing any of that evidence of him using that. And then, just like that, one practice, he goes out and plays tackle, and now he's the starting right tackle as a redshirt freshman. That development arc, Landon, doesn't exist from what I've seen.
Yeah, and I'll give you guys this. It was bowl season last year, and Anthony Donko, like you said, played left guard all year. And bowl season, you're kind of messing around with things, and we go over to do one-on-ones. And Trout just says, hey, get a rep at right tackle. I think someone needed to get some water, tie their shoe, whatever. Anthony went out. I forget who it was, but he clamped the guy up at right tackle. And then that was it from there. So that is the story of how Anthony Donko was born at right tackle. It was a bowl practice, just kind of moving it along, trying to get through the practices. Trout moved him out at right tackle. He won the rep. And the rest is history. I think Anthony Donko is going to be a really good right tackle for us for a long time.
And we'll see what he can do today against this UCLA defense. Good run defenders from a physical standpoint, but we'll see what they're going to do against a guy like Anthony Donko, who feels like a runaway freight train right now. It's not just Penn State football, though, here on campus. This week in Penn State sports now, we're going to get to on the Blaze Alexander family dealerships. We'll be right back with the Tailgate Show on 99.5 and 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.
It's more than just football at Penn State. Here's This Week in Penn State Sports, brought to you by Bobby Rahal Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Rahal Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at BobbyRahalLexusofLewistown.com.
Happy Valley weather has finally turned cold, and with it comes a return to the ice. Penn State women's ice hockey team split the opening series against the 13th-ranked Northeastern Huskies last week. The 12th-ranked Nittany Lions head on the road for the first time this season this week as they go to 9th best team in the nation and similarly mascotted team, the Yukon Huskies. The second matchup of the series takes place tonight, the first of which was less than 24 hours ago. The women's season is already underway, while the men are just getting started. The Nittany Lions are a little over 12 hours away from their first game of the season, and yes, 12 hours away, like their matchup is literally tonight against Alaska in Fairbanks at approximately 11 p.m. Tomorrow's matchup is a tad earlier, thankfully, only being a 9 p.m. puck drop. Before they come home to Pegula Ice Arena is a stop next Saturday against 2023 NCAA Frozen Four champion Quinnipiac University Bobcats in Hamden, Connecticut. Hockey is back in State College and hoops are not far away. Coach Mike Rhodes and seniors Ace Baldwin and Puff Johnson made their way to Chicago for Big Ten men's basketball's media days. Second-year Happy Valley resident Ace Baldwin made his way onto the Big Ten preseason first team. Ace's recognition did not mean much, however, to the rankings, as Penn State is currently slotted as the second worst team in the Big Ten preseason rankings. The only team below them, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Our minds are on the football field and not on the diamond just yet, but that doesn't stop Mike Gambino's squad from making headlines. The Nittany Lions baseball team released their Big Ten matchups for the 2024-2025 season. Teams making their way to Meadowfield-Abrana Park include Indiana, Michigan State, USC, Purdue, and Maryland. Gambino's crew head on the road to Northwestern, Michigan, Minnesota, UCLA, and end the season at Rutgers in Piscataway. That was This Week in Penn State Sports. Back at the Tailgate Show in a moment.
UCLA, the game on the field this weekend. We're going to end the show here, giving you our preview of the game, including our score predictions at the end. So if you want to get your score predictions into the chat, I will ask these guys questions, not pay attention to their answers, and then read your comments. So let's start off. Fitz, what do you think is important about this game from a Penn State perspective towards a victory, which I think as nearly a 30-point favorite everyone feels is going to happen. But in these situations, we talk about improvement and areas you want to see of growth and development. What are you looking for there?
Yeah, just clean up on aisle two. Like some of the stuff that they ran themselves into last week with penalties, with sort of shooting drives in the foot, all those sort of things just kind of need cleaned up before you get to the better part of your schedule, which obviously lies ahead next week when you go to USC. So yeah, turn those things into positives or net neutrals, really, and then that will result in points. UCLA is wounded. They're not in a great spot right now, I would say. But it's still a Big Ten team coming in, and they did some nice things. I watched the Indiana game a couple days ago. They did some nice things. I don't think they have the depth across the board. They're a team in transition, in basically in the middle of a rebuild. Denton Lynn got out of there, and I'm glad he did. No, it's a team that's got some significant holes and kind of starts at quarterback. Is Garber's going to be able to go? His foot's in a boot 3 days before the game. That's not a good sign. The guy that they're going to run with, though, is I'll call him a dual threat, but he's a runner. Like he's going to be a guy that runs. And we've seen defenses, no matter whether it's Pry, Diaz, or I don't know about Tom Allen, but when there's a running quarterback, that can pose a certain kind of threat. So curious how they handle it. I think it'll be a good learning experience for that defense to figure out how to get through these things. I'm not sure that's something that's prevalent on the roster down the road, but you always want to diversify yourself as a defense. So I think there are steps to make this a building blocks game that can really benefit Penn State to get them not back on track, because they did dominate Illinois last week, but getting them on track in the column that matters, which is the scoreboard.
Yeah. I think everyone saw one thing and then the scoreboard indicated another. So Ryan, I guess just your thoughts on where the areas to make those two things match a little better. Where does that start for you?
Oh, penalties, right? And we're going to talk about that, of course. But that's I really agree with everything Sean said there. I don't have too much more to add. I will say Justin Martin, if he is the quarterback UCLA throws out there this weekend, was a pretty good player. Top 300 prospect for on three, certainly can move really well. There's information there that he's has all the athleticism. I think UCLA has stuck with Garbers though, because they flat out know that he knows the offense better. We're talking about Eric Bieniemy offense that I don't know.
And they do a lot.
It seems
they do
like
so much on offense.
They seems like they may be overcomplicating things. Is that fair to say, T. Frank?
That was going to be what I was going to. That was going to be my whole thing. So you nailed it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So throwing a guy like Justin Martin out there, a 2022 recruit, just get the vibe that they're going to have to really simplify stuff if he's the quarterback this week.
Award-winning residential, personal care, skilled nursing, rehab, and memory care for older adults.
Welcome back to the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show. More than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. Not just a spokesperson, but a customer. At Blaze Alexander Mazda. Shout out to the guys over there for all the great work they do. Unfortunately, I've been there way more than I wanted to. It's like in the last year and a half, my car has been a magnet for deer and bad drivers. So, they do a great job. But let's talk about around the Big Ten, which is usually this segment for a noon game. Maybe there's a Friday game, maybe. But, we're previewing things coming up. We did hit the Big Ten after dark. Oregon, Michigan State starting at 9 p.m. I am not ashamed to say I did not watch that game. I had to do this and sleep. So, one of the things had to be chopped off.
So you have a family.
31-10 over Michigan State. But Oregon doesn't. It's in the chat. I've seen this from them this year watching other teams play them. They're not the boogeyman of the Big Ten that I think a lot of people expected coming in from the Pac-12. So did you see any of this game?
Yes, I did.
What do you think?
Dylan Gabriel is not as good as everybody thought. I think and he just makes bad mistakes.
Yeah.
It feels like his processing isn't all. And don't get me wrong, he'll throw a deep ball to Taz Williams and a couple of these other speedsters that he has, and it's just it's a cheat code against a really bad Michigan State team. But then it's like, okay, you're supposed to be a top 10 team, and now Dylan Gabriel has thrown in the past 2 weeks, he's thrown 3 goal line interceptions.
Yeah.
That is hurting your team. You are leaving points directly on the board. One of them a pick 6 against UCLA. That's kind of why UCLA stayed in the game. There was 6 seconds left before half.
Yep.
Oregon's up 28-3 against UCLA on UCLA's through 4-yard line. Dylan Gabriel throws a 100-yard pick 6 to the UCLA defense. It's like, dude, you got to be a little bit better than that.
Yeah, so for a guy who's been in football, I think now for 6 years?
5 or 6 years.
6? It might be almost 7 because he was at UCF, then he was at Oklahoma, and now he's at Oregon.
I think we're a little bit fooled by the aura that the guys from last year, the 1-year transfer guy, go and succeed.
Yep.
It was so much thought that was going to be Dylan Gabriel. No question. He's going to be just
Bo
like
Nix
Bo
did
Nix.
It. Yep.
And no. I saw someone tweet out, it was how much is he like Bo Nix? In the sense of he just kind of, Bo Nix would just fall apart a little bit.
He would do things that go, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
And you're seeing that out of Dylan Gabriel right now. So I think you're right. Oregon is not someone I am, obviously we're playing. That would be a huge matchup, maybe in the playoffs, something like that. But right now, I don't see them as an Ohio State type team.
Yeah, class of 2019 for Dylan Gabriel. This really is an equalizer, though, when you can find a professional quarterback, a 6th-year quarterback to come in and operate your offense and your team. One of the things that I've noticed just about Oregon is if you spam a defense with screens, it's not aesthetically pleasing to me. If they throw so many screens, and it's first off, that's not a quarterback play. That is a receiver and blocker play. It is a run play. It is not a passing play. And so, you are getting this false sense of the stats from a bunch of screens where the quarterback isn't really involved in the play. And so I think that is a part of the conversation about Dylan Gabriel, the numbers, the data, and how people view games. They're not going to watch every single game in college football. But it's still obviously a team that is a good football team. Don't want to, in our assessment of them, from bringing them off the pedestal, we don't want to then bury them. This is obviously a team that will be contending for a Big Ten championship and a playoff spot. But 31-10 over Michigan State. Purdue at Wisconsin is the noon game opposite Penn State, UCLA. I'll just run through this quickly. Iowa at Ohio State, Indiana now ranked at Northwestern, Rutgers at Nebraska, Michigan at Washington, and USC at Minnesota. Those last two, the primetime games tonight. What of that lineup interests you? If you have a chance to see any of these games or watch them on replay, what are you going to be looking at?
I'm kind of excited for Rutgers, Nebraska. I want to see what Matt Rule is really up to. Can Dylan Raiola kind of continue to get back on track? And then it's kind of a heat check for Rutgers a little bit, who you look at their schedule and they don't play any of the Big Four in the Big Ten. They don't play Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, or Michigan. So they're living a good life. There's a world where Rutgers could somehow, if you want to, do you put them? They're one loss. Do you put them in the playoffs? Like, can
so
you
this
do
is
that?
this is my question, and I think this is where you don't have the BCS, you don't have any of those mathematical equations. You have the College Football Playoff Committee for all of the, I don't want to say bad, but all of the politics behind it. I also think they do things like not put Rutgers into a college football playoff because of the strength of schedule. Because if you have one loss but you have no quality wins, that is also important. Like, we do have to have an eye test by people who know what they're looking at to make those discerning decisions, because before we didn't have that and everyone hated the system.
I think I have a good example for this. So you think about the Group of Five. The Group of Five always got the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
Now a Group of Five gets the 12th seed, and that team is going to have to be undefeated. I think Rutgers is in a similar situation. If they go undefeated, you have to put them in.
Yeah,
if they lose
that
one
includes
game,
the Big Ten championship game.
Well, that's a fair point. Good point there.
They've got to go to the championship game and somehow win that too.
Yes. So it's a long road for Rutgers to make it far. But I do look forward to that game just because they have been running the ball. Probably one of the best running teams in all of college football. I'm drawing a blank on their running back's name, but he is legit.
Is it Sumanungai?
Sumanungai, that's
okay.
it. Yeah. He is doing a really, really good job, and the offensive line is blocking up well for him. So, I mean, Rutgers, they are a good team. We finally don't get a Rutgers game at the end of the year. That's going to feel weird.
Yeah.
Do we have Michigan State? No.
It's got to be Michigan State.
No, we do.
Because
Maryland's the last game.
It's Maryland.
We have been doing Michigan State as the last game for I don't know, since I've been recruited.
Yeah, they tried to you get the action figures and you put in, you make them fight, even though that doesn't make any sense. They wanted to find a rival, right? There's unrivaled came out of Rutgers is definitely not Penn State's rival, and Michigan State that almost worked, but then they kept flip-flopping it once you added those other schools into the Big Ten. Yeah, it is Minnesota, Maryland is how the season ends instead of Michigan State or Rutgers, which you're right, that's weird.
It's odd.
I'm a little thrown off, and because of that, we need to go. We need to get to our final segment. Coming up next, we'll get our predictions for the game, get Landon's bold prediction, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Penn State and UCLA coming up at noon on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate 2024.
You will experience amazing.
So, Ryan, what do you think is going to happen this week for Penn State from a final score perspective and your view of how you think the gap is between these two teams?
It is basketball media day. This is Nate's day. So he's definitely not here anymore. This is his big day. So here's my thing. Everything on paper points to this should be a pretty easy win for Penn State. And I do think that they will win fairly easily. I think a lot of people are also pointing to 9 a.m. local kick, 28-point spread. What is the reason behind that? My fear listen, Penn State's going to win this game. I can give you all the reasons why. I think a lot of people think Penn State's going to cover 28, though, and that I actually don't like. Look, this is a terrible, terrible spot for Penn State, and we've seen this in the past, coming off a top 25 win, which was basically the whiteout game last week. And now you got to go to USC next week. I mean, you're talking about just if you ever watch gambling shows, you follow this stuff, this is maybe the worst spot of the season for Penn State as far as are they completely focused? You got a noon kick. They got to come out early and explode. They were 7 for 11 on offensive success against West Virginia and Bowling Green, 5 touchdowns. If they can come out and keep a similar pace to that, I think they'll be fine. They should win this game somewhere in the 20s. But to predict them to win by 30, I'm just a little hesitant on. And of course, there's a lot of questions, of course, about what's going to happen with UCLA's quarterback. If it is a running quarterback and they do simplify things, well, we've seen running quarterbacks, especially in situations where Penn State maybe didn't have ample time to prepare for it, give them some issues at times. So my score is 33-10, as Steve Frank just put up. I just think it's a tough spot to predict them to win by 30 points, especially when you consider Oregon did not beat them by that much. LSU did not beat them by that much. Indiana did, but that was also a game where it was just, there were some fluky moments, and it wasn't always going. I mean, it was a 14-point game and midway through the third quarter, I believe, for that Indiana game. So, I just think it's a really tough spot for Penn State. They got to come out fired up on offense. It's all about Penn State's offense this week. I think we know what we'll get from the defense, but their offense needs to come out, put up points early, and that's just in this noon kick spot with everything that's sandwiched around it. I wonder if that's what they're going to do.
And if there is a mistake on defense, exploding through the line of scrimmage to take advantage of it for a touchdown, with the status of Nick Singleton hanging in the air, what happens there, Fitz? What not with Singleton, but what do you think the final score is? What's your prediction?
I've got Penn State 40, UCLA 10. I agree with Ryan in a lot of those things. I mean, Penn State has not started well, and they have not done a good job. That's UCLA, not Illinois. They have not done great out of the gate. Now, I think they have the opportunity to do that Saturday, in the passing game, getting the ball down the field, as you mentioned, with the sort of lapses that they've had. I think that you can't rely on that, but at the same time, I think the possibility, like it's happened so often, that the possibility is certainly there. Defensively, I think they can get some fluky turnovers. I mean,
99.5 The Bus coming up. It is the official tailgate show, the pregame show with Steve and Jack. If you're listening on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, we'll be back for the live postgame show immediately following Penn State UCLA, and of course Landon has his postgame show. You do it Sunday morning?
I do
Sunday morning.
Yep, Sunday morning, 10 to 11 a.m. at the student bookstore as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, come by the Nittany Lion mascots there at 11. Enjoy.
You do all these pre and post game shows downtown. You are a man of the people, out and about, while I sit in my little film cave out in the woods and break down film like a goblin.
I was picturing you like, what's his name from Lord of the Rings?
It's like Gollum?
Yeah, like Gollum. Just like Gollum. But with film instead of the ring. I'm going to make that edit. I'm going to have one of my guys do that.
Oh, God. Oh.
That's great.
I just need like 3 or 4 strands of hair falling off. I've got the template for it. So what's your prediction for this game? What is your prediction, then your bold prediction?
Yeah, I think that the offense and Drew Allar are just going to get going early, and that I think is what we can really hope for. My prediction for the game is 49-3. I think UCLA will get. I don't think they're going to drive too far on our defense. I think they will get 3 points, and then I think the defense just shuts them down. They will not be able to run the ball. They will be in third and long situations, and I think you get to that 49-3 with turnovers. I think you give short fields to Drew Allar, because that's how you start to route a team. It's harder when you're getting the ball every time at your 25, but you get the ball on their 20, a defensive touchdown. That is how the score starts to kind of rack up. Yeah. That is how I see this game going. My bold prediction for today is that Drew Allar is going to set a single game record for himself through passing yards. His record was 325 yards against West Virginia week 1 last year. He will break that record today. That is my bold prediction, T. Frank.
He could get to 400 if he stays in the game long enough, maybe. But I think the only thing standing in the way of your bold prediction is how many points they score before he's able to throw for that many yards. There's one part of this that I would say gives me just a little bit of pause, and it's that teams seem to bring a curveball to Penn State regularly, where they feel like they need to do something that is not on film, that they haven't done previously, and that kind of disjoints Penn State for a quarter and a half. Illinois playing cover 3 last week and playing it so much was what they did in 2023, where they started playing zone coverage again. Like, it's a different variation of a similar idea of giving you something unexpected. If Illinois watched that game last week and decided, we're going to play just simplified defense, we're going to play cover 3, we're going to do the Illinois thing, and we're going to just simplify things and make them earn it, I think Penn State could have a more difficult time marching down the field. The other part of this, I have 38-3. I don't have as many points because on defense, I can't predict when a player's going to make a busted read. And a lot of this has been, they've been good, oh no. And so I don't know when the oh no comes or if the oh no happens. So I could see 58 points in this game if they are completely disjointed and out of sync coming across the country to the East Coast, but I don't know if that's going to happen. You're right. Defensively, I think if the running quarterback plays, there's no offense there to be had. Penn State can shut that down by focusing entirely on the run game.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And like we mentioned earlier in the show, but if you were just now listening, UCLA got into State College 4 or 5 p.m. last night. They woke up this morning for a noon game. You wake up around 6 to 6:30 a.m. to go eat breakfast. They woke up at 3 a.m., essentially their time. They're tired. They're hurting. It's going to be a long one for UCLA today.
I thought I was having a hard time getting here and getting up, and I live 15 minutes away.
Feel you on that one, brother.
So the final keys to the game here. We didn't give you a chance to go wax poetic about the offensive line, so we got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes left. What do you see from this offensive line after last week, and project that forward for us, if you will?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple just keys to the game overall as a whole. Like you said, the offensive line. Continue to hold up in pass pro. UCLA has had 0 sacks in the last 3 games, so I don't think that'll be too hard of a task. Let Drew Allar sling it around, throw the ball deep. Up front, let Katron and Nick continue that dominance on the ground. You're going to have to rely on that in bigger games like USC next week. Switching over to the defensive side of the ball, and on top of that, get Trey Wallace back involved in the offense, truly get him some shots. Going over to the defensive side now, I would say you need to just swarm him. Let Abdul swarm. Let Abdul move around. Swarm whoever they put back there at quarterback. They don't run the ball efficiently at all. Let Zane Durant dominate up front. Put them in 3rd and longs. Get after the quarterback and get turnovers for that offense and put up 49 points for a demanding victory going into next week against USC.
Yeah, I think some of the keys that we talked about, starting out fast, adjusting quickly, I think the offense can do both of those things. They just have to go out and do it. The other thing that I think is important in this game is that you want to get Dejon Lane as much experience as possible. We saw them use the Kent State game essentially as a practice game for that matchup with Illinois. I could see something similar happening against a team you feel very confident about defeating. So get Dejon Lane as many reps as possible and put Zakee Wheatley over at that boundary position. Get your best player in the position you want him to be in, and that means getting Jalen Reed down to that Lion position. I think you see more of that today. I'd like to see more of that today. More for you coming up next. It is the Penn State pregame show on 99.5 The Bus and 107.5 The Bus. For Landon Tengwall, I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week.